So the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles participated in the Jubilee series called Surrounded, where he sat in the middle of a group of 25 LGBTQ activists and debated them on issues like the definition of marriage and whether or not transgenderism is a real thing. The conversation went about as well as you would expect, and I want to react to some of the highlights. So let's get into it. Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. I appreciate you being here. Do me a couple of favors, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and turn on your notifications so that you never miss out on a conversation like the one we're about to have. So, as I said, Michael Knowles stepped into the lion's den of debates recently, where he joined the Jubilee channel to participate in an episode of their series called Surrounded. Most of their episodes go for about 90 minutes, so I'm not going to react to the whole thing, but I will link the video in the description box if you do want to go watch all of it. There are a few clips that I want to get into because unfortunately these are issues we are still having to have a lot of conversations about in today's day and age. Apparently we are still confused about what men and women are, and the points that these activists make about these issues are as unhinged as we've ever seen, probably even more invalid as time has gone on because we have more evidence of the harm that these ideas have caused than we've ever had before. Yet they will still defend them no matter what. One of the claims that Michael makes is that transgenderism should be eradicated from public life entirely. And the person that he is set to debate first is this individual named Blossom, a man who thinks that he is a woman. So to start, Michael lays out his case decently well.
Hello.
Blossom, she, her, hers powerhouse.
The Blossom Powerhouse. Lovely to meet you.
Yes. Go ahead. I want to know your ideology around transgenderism, something that doesn't exist. It just sounds more like conservative propaganda. So I kind of want to know a little bit more about what you're trying to communicate.
Okay. I think for all of history everywhere, people have understood the human person to have something to do with his body. So like your body has something to do with who you are. Now there is an alternative view, which is called Gnosticism. It's a view that our bodies don't really have anything to do with who we are, that the body is maybe even evil, and that our true selves have no connection to our bodies. And I see in the transgender ideology a kind of Gnosticism that says that you could look like a man, you could have a man's genetics, you could have a man's genitals, you could have a man's everything. But if you feel on some deep level that you're really a woman, then you are really a woman. And I don't think that's true. And I think that the social effects of that are really bad because it leads to the depriving women of their legitimate rights. In some cases, it leads to rapes, notably in the last few years. And it also leads to women losing their sports competitions and their scholarships, and it's just disordered and false. And it also leads to more people adopting this identity, which leads to very high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. So it's bad for everyone, and it's not grounded in reality.
Okay, so even before Michael got started, Blossom was asserting that the connection between our physical body and our minds and our hearts and everything that makes us a human being as a whole with a very distinct gender, be it male or female, that's all just conservative propaganda, which is silly because it's something that we agreed on, that we all agreed on up until just a few years ago when activists decided to pump gender ideology, which is based on the philosophies of a deranged sexual predator, and pump it into the school system and pretty much every aspect of everyday life and try to teach everybody and force everybody to believe that picking your gender based on your feelings or based on what toys you play with or what color you like is now the actual facts of how human beings should exist. Then Michael lays out some of the real world consequences that we have seen play out over the last several years, negative consequences that have increased, not decreased, the longer that this has gone on. The negative effects of lying to people about being able to disconnect their mind and their body, and the proven effects that this lie has had on countless people in a catastrophic way. And this is where Blossom just starts to lose it.
I think you understand what you say sometimes. I don't think you even understand what you say, because when we talk about these rape cases of women in the restroom, they're coming from cis men like you. So let's be very clear.
No, that's not true. In 2021, well, I'm just trying to correct you. Well, I would never interrupt a black woman.
No, thank you.
Here's
the thing about me as a black trans woman. I am not a threat to cis women, and I think it is harmful that you are going around here spewing that rhetoric, weaponizing this rhetoric against trans people.
Weaponizing facts.
Transgenderism does not exist. We as trans people exist. We are 1% of the population, and there is a lot of power in the trans identity because you are sitting here spewing spewing something to me that doesn't really
I'm not
exist.
spewing anything. I'm just stating facts
I
plainly.
have lived experience. You don't, and you never will. But I do have a question
I have
for
lived
you.
experience.
What if one of your
I'm alive.
What if one of your kids came out as trans? How would you
God
react
forbid.
to that?
I mean, I would obviously love my children, and I
Okay.
would try to do what's best for my children. And the best thing that I could do to be respectful and also to be conducive to their flourishing
Mhm.
is to tell them the truth, which is that they're not really girls.
All Blossom has at this point is propaganda and emotion, because so far all he said is, you're white, therefore you can't talk. I'm black, therefore my views are fact. I wouldn't physically harm women, so therefore no one would. And I believe I'm a woman, therefore it's proven that men can be women. And then, of course, a lot of times they like to bring in, well, what would you do if this was your kids? As if the only option that exists when your kid has questions about who they are is to appease whatever is going on in their head. And that's just terrible parenting. And then Blossom really becomes unglued.
People like you do not have the intellectual capacity to hold conversations like this, because in a minute you're going to reduce this down to genitalia, and then we're going to have to shift it somewhere else, because obviously
No, in
people
a
like
minute-
you, that's where they go, right?
In a minute, what I'm going to do is correct something you said. When you said that
Go ahead.
the rapes that have occurred in these bathrooms are cis men.
White cis men, I should say,
Yeah,
actually.
that isn't true. Loudoun County, 2021, the big case that actually ended up flipping the state was because there was a boy who wore a skirt, went into the girl's bathroom and raped a girl in a particularly hideous way. And you know what happened? Hold on, don't cut me off. You said you wouldn't.
A cis boy. It was not a trans woman. All y'all do
I don't
is
think
go back to cis boys. You're always talking about cis boys.
he was wearing-
I don't understand
he was
the
wearing-
fascination with trans bodies and what's happening in the bathroom. It is mostly happening.
I think
from
you're
white, cis
filibustering because you
men.
don't want me to tell you what happened in the
filibuster
bathroom.
who?
Me, yes.
You're
But-
talking to
but
an
your
activist here.
but your
You're
identity
talking to a
is not
debater here.
grounded
You're
in
talking to somebody
reality.
that's extreme. Oh, I am reality.
I'm not really talking to
In your
anyone because
head,
you
I'm
keep
not.
talking over
in
me.
your head, I'm not, but I am in reality.
Yeah.
I'm here in front of you right now talking to you.
You're confused
Because
about your identity.
No, you are confused
I'm not
at the fact that you don't really have any talking points right now, because
Then why aren't you letting me speak?
You really don't.
If I have nothing to say,
Take me
why
on
aren't
your
you letting me
show.
speak? In
But go
2018, there were 2 rapes in bathrooms, and one in Wisconsin, one in Georgia,
From men,
also
cis
because
men,
of the
say it.
transgender identity.
But say it, cis men.
If you're
cis men.
if you're going to describe a boy who wears a skirt and goes into a girl's bathroom
No, you
as
are.
a cis man, no, I didn't.
No, you are. This is the example that you run to. Past that, you have nothing.
I've just given
You
you 3
have
examples.
nothing.
I've given you 3
You have
examples in
nothing.
recent years.
You don't. You've
Well,
been
that's
struggling this entire
news to
time.
me.
I love
The
it.
trans lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Bye.
So there are a few things to dissect here. This person is clearly incapable of having a rational discussion. And just because you scream the loudest and don't let someone else talk does not mean that you have won the debate, because if you don't let someone else talk, there is no debate, and therefore there is nothing to win. And the grape issue is just one aspect of it. And often it's the one that people like this focus on because they can't argue the biological reality of the situation. This way, they can just reduce the argument to us simply trying to paint trans people as predators, and that's why we can't accept transgenderism. The case specifically that Michael is referring to, yes, it was a boy in a skirt, and there was never any real clarity on whether or not this kid identified as transgender. But the point is that these policies of being able to call yourself whatever you want and then gain access to whatever space aligns with the identity that you've given yourself puts people in danger, specifically women and girls. And the transgender title is irrelevant because there is no guidelines to differentiate between a boy who puts on a skirt versus a boy who puts on a skirt and genuinely believes that he is a girl. And even if there were, it wouldn't make it any more valid because you can't change your sex. It's the ideology, which is what Michael's whole argument is based on. That's the problem. He's arguing that transgenderism should be eradicated from society because it has set the foundation for the policies that allow things like this to happen. But then people like Blossom and most trans activists make it about them and say it's a personal attack against them, or that people don't believe they exist, when that's not the point. Because as a human being, you clearly exist, and yes, you have rights. You even have the right to believe that you are a woman. You just don't have the right to make society bend in a way that takes rights and safety away from other people simply based on what you have going on in your head. That is the mindset of a toddler. And we teach toddlers that there is order to things for a reason, and that they are going to be angry and miserable if they grow up thinking that the world revolves around them. This is why so many progressive ideas are so regressive, because it sends people back to a very immature and underdeveloped way of thinking. As I said, if you can't let the other person talk, then you are the loser in the argument. It just means you can't back up your points with facts, so you have to drown out the other person before they can prove it. So the next clip I want to focus on is of this gal who comes right after Blossom, and she perfectly shows us how unhinged and fragile these beliefs and this ideology is, even when they themselves try to defend them.
So if we're going to think about women getting raped in bathrooms, right? It's a small percentage of trans people that are doing it. I'm not denying that that's happening because it is a reality and it's an awful thing for women to have to go through.
Yeah.
But then what are we doing about the men that are the 93% of sexual violence towards women?
No, hopefully arresting them and putting them in prison.
And what are you doing before that? Why are men the highest percentage for this? If it's such a bad thing for trans women to use the bathroom when a very, very, very small amount of women are being raped by trans women, why are we not having any sort of things before?
Because trans women are men, so they are included in the statistic of people that attack women anyway.
Or for men.
I think we try to enforce our laws and protect people from rape, and so we take
apparently not very well.
No, I think relatively well. We have a relatively low rate of these kinds of violent crimes compared to other places in the world. But in one area, we're talking about men forcing themselves into women's bathrooms. This is one area where we don't need to allow them to do that. It's a needless risk. It's based on a false view of reality and claims of rights, so-called rights, from confused men that infringe on the legitimate rights of women, not just in bathrooms, but also in sports competitions, also in scholarships, also in just about anywhere else in society. So I think that we have the right to insist upon some kind of reality, because I think not only will that be better for women, not only will that be better for society broadly, but that especially will be better for the individuals who are confused about their gender identity.
So the first point that she brings up is about these rape cases in bathrooms. And I can appreciate that she at least acknowledges that this happens. But her question about what we are doing about like the 93% of SA that happens at the hands of men who are not going into women's bathrooms dressed up like women, well, the law is a great deterrent for that, as Michael brings up. A lot of men, but people in general, avoid committing various types of crimes because they're driven by a moral sense of right and wrong, but also most people don't want to end up with a criminal record or to go to jail. But obviously, having laws in place doesn't keep people from doing bad things. It imposes consequences on people when they do. If laws actually stopped crime, we wouldn't have anybody in prison. What we also do is try to set a strong moral foundation for men in how to treat women by raising them with a strong father in the home, with a moral sense of right and wrong. And a lot of that comes from regular participation in religion and developing a relationship with God. We also teach boys how to use their physical strength and their natural masculinity for good, to provide and protect. You know, all of the things that white liberal women like this protest against constantly. So when liberal women bring this argument to the table, what are you going to do to create better men? They're not really interested in the answer because they want to keep blaming men for everything instead of acknowledging that homes with a mother and a father, led with a focus on God and a desire to provide and protect, are what combats a lot of the problems she claims she wants a solution to. But when it comes to the trans issue, if we know that there are men who pose a threat to women, because not all men do, but some do, then why would we give them an even greater opportunity to harm women? Because men who want to harm women are not going to be held back at the idea of having to put on a dress in order to do it. That is not a line for them. And that's evident by the case that Michael brought up with Blossom, because the boy in that situation didn't even have to identify as trans to harm a woman. He just had to put on a skirt and he was able to carry out whatever he wanted to carry out. And then the case was swept under the rug by the school board because they were more concerned about appearing transphobic to a boy with identity issues than protecting the girl. And then she goes here.
For men,
we teach people in class.
You're not teaching them very well, apparently. I mean, we have Republican parties who are literally putting a president who is a felon who has sexually assaulted people. What does that say to men?
Yeah, no one really buys that.
I buy it.
No one really buys it.
Well, of course, they buy it. They're also the ones trying to tell us that men can be women. So they're clearly the easiest people to convince of anything that the activist propagandist arm of the Democrat Party wants them to believe.
No one seriously thinks that Donald Trump is a rapist. I know we pretend because the Democrats were trying to prosecute him 4 different ways and kicking him off.
If rape is such a bad thing, why don't you believe women when they say it's happening? Because you're not believing Trump when he says that he didn't do it. Whatever, but you're not believing the woman.
Yeah, the claim you're making about Trump obviously was not criminally prosecuted. It comes from about 30 years ago from a woman who previously said that she likes rape and finds it, scintillating. Gross. And I know it's terrible. So anyway, women
has ever said
so
that.
That woman did. The Trump's accuser literally said that to Anderson Cooper on CNN.
Well, I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Right. So no sane woman is going to say that, but using a woman who has made a claim like that heavily damages their case because she looks crazy and is the kind of person who would falsely accuse a man. And she has over a dozen times. Women can lie, then E. Jean Carroll can lie. We had Crystal Magnum that just came out and admitted that she lied about being assaulted by Duke lacrosse team members 18 years ago. Yes, it might be a small percentage, but it happens, except when it's women accusing someone on the right, then they'll believe it anytime and every time, no matter how ridiculous the claim is. So that's what they mean when they say believe all women. They just mean believe all women who accuse conservative men. So then they get back to Michael's original argument, which is that transgenderism should be eradicated from public life entirely. And this is where we see just how credible this woman is.
What does transgenderism in public look like to you?
It's allowing men to be treated for the purposes of the law as women. It's men taking 900 sports trophies from women in recent years. And
they didn't take 900.
They took 900. There's a report just came out from the United Nations, actually. 890 trophies and medals across 600 women who were competitors across 29 different sports and 400 competitions. That came out like yesterday.
And they deserved them.
It didn't happen and they deserve them. Okay, that is the logic.
And this is what it really comes down to for these people, for people who keep telling us that we're uneducated and that we don't know what we're talking about and that we don't have all of the information. Even this gal, as part of the crowd, clearly hadn't heard about that either. So the first argument is to deny that it happened, which suggests that if it did, that it would bother you and perhaps be a line in the sand. But then when they find out that it's a fact, the automatic reflex is to just support it, which just demonstrates how easy it is to propagandize these people. There is no line. I am a programmed activist, and that means I will support whatever furthers this cause and oppose anything that might make me question it. Period. The propagandist leaders of their party know that they can feed these people anything and they're just going to go along with it. It is absolutely insane. So the last guy I wanted to watch just briefly is this guy because it really is amusing.
Hey, good to meet you, Mindy.
Mindy, nice to meet you.
Yeah. Oh, my name's Mason, but
Mason.
good to meet you. Yeah.
I'm Michael.
Oh, gotcha. Wait, do you have a birth certificate?
Not on.
So the claim that Michael is making in this particular area of the debate is there is no such thing as same-sex marriage. And he calls Michael by the wrong name because clearly these people think that the rest of us are as triggered about being misgendered or called the wrong name as they are. And it really just makes them look silly.
Bringing it back to the prompt, going back to specifically same-sex marriage. You said you argued from an anthropology, that's like your basis of
men and women are different and marriage involves one of each.
Which specific culture are you referring to? Because we have so many cultures that have communal relationships in which people are raised. When you said in the act of procreation, have you ever heard of it takes a village to raise kids? But that's not something that's just a saying.
No, I didn't say
it happens literally in specific cultures.
No, but when I say procreation, that's the act of creating the child. And usually there aren't 3 or 4 people involved in that. It's usually 2 people.
So when he brings up this point, it takes a village to raise a child, that's not a literal thing, at least not in Western countries. It's really just about the fact that it's nice to have help and be able to rely on friends and family, whether it be for childcare or help through challenging times or looking for advice. There are valuable aspects to having a supportive community when you are raising your kids. But at the end of the day, you are the parent raising your child. Just because my kids spend 7 hours a day with their teacher in school doesn't mean that their teacher is raising them. So it really is just a faulty argument. But this is where he really starts to get himself in trouble.
Even those people that do create the child oftentimes were referred to as different genders depending on the culture that it is that you're observing.
Which cultures are you referring to?
We could talk about the Mayans. We could talk about certain Amazonian cultures. I recognize that they're not Western cultures, so you might not prioritize them. What was that doesn't mean that they don't exist.
What was their? Well, they no longer exist, the Mayans.
Oh, right, because of colonialism. I'm glad that you're just.
But what was their view of gender? What specifically are you referring to?
Specifically a social characteristic that we're all performing in right now. I mean, you can't say.
No, I'm not. What did the Mayans think?
That's just something that is.
But what did the Mayans think? You brought it up. You seem so confident about this. What did the Mayans think about marriage and gender?
We can talk about difference in the way that they are recognized.
Can we? I don't know that you know the difference. You said there was a difference, but you haven't explained how there was a difference. And I think this is what people do a lot.
Wait, is this prompt specifically on the Mayan anthropology?
Okay, I'm trying to drill down Just when you say there are different understandings of marriage throughout history and time and space, I say, okay, maybe that's possible. How? Tell me, point to the examples. And you said, well, the Mayans. And I said, okay, well, what did the Mayans think about marriage? And you don't have an answer. And none of these people have answers because everyone has. Do you have an answer?
People can look up right now. If you're right near a Google, yeah, exactly. Michael's trying to hone me down on trivia night right now.
No, I'm just
right
asking
now,
you to
we're
explain.
Trying to talk about specifically our examples.
I'm asking you to explain the point that you brought up. And so what people usually do is they say, well, look, I'm sure that there were all different types of marriage throughout history all over the world. And what I'm telling you is, there actually hasn't.
He's just asking you to defend the point that you brought up. You obviously believe that the Mayan culture is relevant. And in order to believe that, you must understand what their beliefs were and how they approached marriage and gender. So don't bring up something that you can't defend or that clearly you don't know anything about. This happens all the time with these liberal activists. They bring up something, and if you ask them to clarify or explain the point that they're referencing, they'll either say, I'm not going to explain it to you, or they just say, well, do your own research. I'm not going to research it for you, or they'll just call you names and block you. When I ask someone what they mean, I'm genuinely curious. I'm waiting for them to bring that substance into the discussion. But then when I or anybody else asks them for that substance, they just start to resort to personal attacks, or they turn the tables on you or the other person, and then they just start to get emotional. And I think what this also proves is that so often these people come to the conversation, particularly when liberals are trying to address conservatives, and they're coming to the conversation under the false idea that on the right, we're uneducated and that we don't know what we're talking about, or that we don't understand the issues that they are bringing to the table, or that because we advocate for traditionalism, that we aren't familiar with modern and progressive ideas. And then they completely lose it when they realize that we actually have facts and evidence to back up what we're saying, because the people who are the mouthpieces for their party have given them the false idea that they are smarter than everybody else. They think they can just bring up something like the Mayans, and they're clearly banking on the idea that the person they're sitting across from, because they're conservative, isn't going to be able to disprove what they're saying. And then they lose it when they realize, oh, they actually have done their research. Oh, they actually are educated. These people think they know everything because they have no idea how much they don't know. And even funnier is that after all of this, it's still impossible to get through to them. Michael did a follow-up episode on his channel about what it was like to debate in this format, and it included people from the debate giving their opinions on talking to Michael Knowles. And this is what the Mayan guy had to say.
Michael's a fucking clown. I've talked to Ben Shapiro, I've talked to Charlie Kirk, I've talked to a lot of conservative figures, and he is the worst at having some sort of cohesive argument. All he tries to do is push people's buttons to get these emotional responses that then he can turn into those viral clips.
This person is just embarrassed because they brought up a point that they could not defend. So of course, they're not the problem. Michael is. Anyway, that is all I have for you with this one. Thank you so much for watching. I would appreciate it again if you would hit the thumbs up button, become a subscriber to my channel if you're not already, and help me to grow this channel. Keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.